Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with Politics Tonight. It is 8 months into the administration of President Bola Tinubu, but how has the president fared in the last 8 months, despite inheriting enormous institutional, economic, and domestic challenges? Tonight, we'll speak with Chief Niyi Akinsiju, journalist, writer, policy analyst. He's also the chairman, Independent Media and Policy Initiative. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on Politics Tonight.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a privilege to be with you.
Right. So, first, there are those who have said 8 months into the life of a new administration is an early day for a 4-year tenure. However, what's your general assessment of the Tinubu administration so far?
Well, I think it's months into the life of an administration is actually very, very important. Those are the first days. They are the first days in an administration, and they clearly indicate where and what the administration is intended to undertake, which are very, very important. Because as the Yorubas, for instance, will say, how tomorrow will be would be obvious today. So these 8 months have shown that we have an administration that is committed to reforming the system. And when I say the system, I'm talking about the Nigerian ecosystem, as it were. And that is inclusive of our economy, the security, and of course, our social life, as it were. So these 8 months, the past 8 months, for us, obviously months that are indicative of a foundation laying for a new kind of environment. You know, at the level of the economy, we are seeing perhaps what I would describe as courageous but revolutionary, because it's one paradigm that is not. It is not commonplace since 1960, for instance, because it's like a paradigm shift. It's a new model that the administration is putting in place. And for those of us that undertook to understudy what the administration has been doing, it's obvious that there had been some form of understudy, some form of serious investigation and policy decision-making before this implementation of the policies of changing the Nigerian economic model, because that clearly is what we're experiencing now, a model change. We are changing from, well, a mixed economy, as it were, though I think it's also wrong to actually describe it as a mixed economy, because the pillars that make up a mixed economy had not been there. You know, so that even has a deficiency or a deficit by itself. But now, whatever may be the deficiency of that model, we are seeing clearly a move, a transition to what we call the open market-driven economy. And I think where we are today, perhaps that is the most obvious dispensation that we need to drive as a country. But it will only take someone who has a champion mindset, who is courageous, who is charismatic, to undertake that kind of change. Because the truth of the matter is, when you apply this kind of policy, it is always obvious that at the initial level, it will be associated with pains, it will be associated with challenges, and of course, in a country where we had not actually had so much wealth creation over the past so many years, it would be like a further affliction, you know, of the large number of the very poor that we have. Meanwhile, it is the systems that we have been running that is associated with corruption and inefficiency that have created a large number of very poor, vulnerable people, you know. And this is the only way. I am saying it because we have compared with possible models that could be applied. For me and for the organization that I represent, this is the only way that we can actually create that enablement of prosperity that will impact virtually everybody, going in the medium to long term.
So let's take a look at this this bold steps backed up by the policies. Which of them would you consider the most impactful and daring?
I think the most daring are the twin policies of removal of fuel subsidy and the harmonization of the foreign exchange transaction windows. Because these two policies actually talks to wastages. And if we do not redeem ourselves from those hitherto policies, we would have created what I call a dependency economy. And mostly, we're talking about a situation where we use our sovereign funds, our sovereign wealth, as little as they were, to just continue to fund our appetite, our consumption, more or less. Fund purchases of PMS. We also subsidize our foreign exchange. Our foreign exchange, it's not an asset that is shared by everybody. So it is only those who are privileged, to access it, either as travelers, as businessmen, or manufacturers, that enjoy directly the benefit of the the subsidy with which we subsidize our forex. So, to a large extent, there is even inequity inherent in that aspect of the subsidy that we are talking about. So, by removing subsidy from PMS, as it were, it created what had been a burden, because historically we know that we use government fund to buy, we use government fund to circulate, to distribute, and at the end of the day, a large percentage of revenue earnings that we are supposed to take into our current accounts as it were as a sovereign, we use to subsidize this consumption. So and of course that reflects in our quality of life. Over the years, hardly do we get to execute our capital budget, the capital side of our budget, for instance. So while there is a drive to provide for the recurrent side of the budget, and that recurrent side of the budget is limited to workers of federal government and perhaps public servants, the larger percentage of Nigerians can only benefit from the provisions provided by the capital side of the budget. Meanwhile, there are years that we don't even achieve up to 40% performance in the budget, on the capital side of the budget. So we have seen inequity in every way. And we are consciously, by the continuation of this policy, we are consciously continued to create more poor people. Because rather than have revenue and earnings that can be channeled into productive activities or channeled into providing infrastructure that helps productivity, we just kind of literally share this money into liters of fuel, and it ends there. The truth of the matter is, subsidy had outlived its usefulness. The reason for introducing it in the 70s, was to help create enabling and comfort environment for Nigerians. But since then, our population had exploded. Our productivity had shifted frame. We used to be even more dependent on imports back in those days. And now that there's a need for us to produce more within the domestic economy, we are just filtering all our opportunities. And it's the same thing with foreign exchange. The foreign exchange that we sell, it is after we determine the real price of a dollar to a naira, for instance, in the coming weeks, that we will know how much we have been using to fund the subsidy of each dollar that we give out, as it were. So now, how impactful it will be is clear. With the removal of these two monsters, as I want to describe it, now there will be more earnings, and these more earnings will be directed into productive activities. And we can see now that for the first time since we have been reading about the history of Nigeria, we have been reading about government in Nigeria, we now have a government that is saving money from fact allocation. So, whereas at the point in time, we generated money, we would have to borrow more money to stabilize the economy, as it were. But now we generate money, we deploy, we disburse for expenditure, and at the same time, we're able to keep some, a certain percentage for either the rainy day or to finance or fund possible capital expenditure. That is economy.
Right. So we'll come back to the issue of subsidy removal and how the federal government has fared in mitigating the impact. But it's also very worrisome that the president and some of his aides had said the administration inherited huge liabilities from the immediate past administration. As a policy analyst, how serious do you consider this situation?
The truth, again, is this subsidy. That's the culprit. The past administration tried to create a stable environment, and in doing that, it had to borrow. We were actually borrowing money to fund our subsidy commitments as a country, and because those money were not exactly being directed at development, productivity, we landed in this situation. So, and again, if we look back over the last 8 years plus, since 2015, you will realize that there had been no point that we had the good fortune of our normal boom cycle. The Nigerian economy over the years had had a character of a circle of boom and bust. It is not about policy. At the point in time, you will have a number of years, where crude oil prices will go up. And we are fortunate we are producing higher crude oil quantity. And at that time, we will earn so much money. But we will not apply this money, we will not apply this revenue. Everybody will burst into a festival of consumption. And at the end of the day, when the burst cycle comes in, we complain because we have not applied the resources or the revenue hand in the most economic manner. We only consume. So, because since 2015, there have been two recessions as a result of decline in the price of crude oil, decline in the production quantity of the quantity produced of crude oil, and of course, as a result of COVID-19, we found ourselves in that situation, and there's little anybody could have done about it because these are activities, occasions, that constrict earnings, and therefore that was why we went into those recessions. The past government thought, well, the only way we could get out of the recession was to spend our way out. Thankfully, we spent our way out, but here we have this burden. Now, for how long do we now also move forward, from that point, by still sustaining the kind of wasteful taste that led us into those circumstances? I think the reality should start dawning on every Nigerian that there is a need to wake up from our slumber, a need to be development focused, and perhaps even more important, to be production-minded as individuals and as a country.
Right, so we'll come back to that. But some of the steps taken by the president, which many Nigerians have applauded him, is emphasis on the performance of his ministers. I mean, the president has said their appointments are based on service delivery and can be revoked at any time. What does this say about the person of President Bola Tinubu?
We describe him in our report as a hands-on president that follow through with his policy, a president that breaks down the necks of his officials of state. So, and that's the kind of president we need at this time, because the president cannot afford to fail. And that every minister, every official of state is actually an extension of the thought process and, of course, action tendency, action inclination of the president. So therefore, it's like the president replicating himself in all those, in the ministers, in the DGs, and other top officials of state. And it would mean that any of those officers that are not properly connected to the trunk, of the tree would lack the normal nourishment to keep on driving the vision, as it were. So, if there is a threat to the fact that if you do not perform optimally, you will be cut out. It's simple, a simple KYC. It's your key performance KPI. It's about saying this is your key performance indicators. These are the things you want to look at. If you do not meet up with them, you'll be excused. And that's like being upfront with his appointees. So it makes life much easier. There are expectations by we, the citizens, and of course, it is not just expectations from the minister, but ultimately from the president.
Right. So just like you said earlier, the elimination of fuel subsidy has brought both challenges and opportunities, and records show that there is a turning point in government revenue generation. But Nigerians are more concerned about the challenges they have been facing as a result of this removal. How do you think the president has fared in addressing this challenge, especially mitigating the impact on citizens?
I try as much as possible to be practical. When the president was assuming office, when he was being sworn in, I checked the records, the books of Nigeria. And the reality is that we did not have any savings. So even if the president had good intentions, it's either we continued borrowing, that is, as a sovereign, he continued borrowing to provide palliative, to Nigerians. And of course, it becomes a catch-22 for us. We are still borrowing money. We know that our debt is becoming excessive. And of course, we know there is a need to start channeling or rechanneling fund, the little we have, to production. And when you have that kind of scenario, we have to take one option. And that option is about facing the challenges, knowing that in the immediate to the medium term, we would emerge, into the developmental sphere. So it's a medium-term thing. And we can only continue to appeal, to Nigerians, to understand and, of course, persevere in the consideration and in the understanding that this is a process and I will be better off. Then we have stagnated over the years. We just keep existing. Either at the level of our GDP or our per capita GDP. Sometimes we have this oil boom and we are so happy, but by the time we also divide what we have earned as a country amongst the close to 200 or more than 200 million people we have generated over the years, we realize that just a little of this revenue come to individual Nigerians, and it does not even come to them, literally. It's on the books, So what our appeal, what my appeal is, as an independent understudy of what the president had been doing, is to assert that this president knows what he's doing, and that he is a practical-minded president, to the extent of not playing to the gallery, because he could have continued with what had obtained before. And that will be, all right, we had this situation. We do not want Nigerians to be distressed. We want Nigerians to be happy with us no matter the condition, and we continue to take loan. We continue to increase our debt so that we can continue to service, to service and satisfy our taste, for our fuel, our hunger for our dollar, and of course our taste for foreign goods, not made in Nigerian goods. These are things we need to start situating or contextualizing as what exactly are we doing, or how are we conducting ourselves in the business of being a Nigerian.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, to add to that, the federal government announced a 5 billion naira palliative for each state, including the Federal Capital Territory, to cushion the impact of the fuel subsidy removal. Do you think the governors did their best in corroborating the effect of the federal government?
Well, I think what the federal government did was just a trigger. I would have expected the governors, and a number of them actually did, to even go further. I know that a number of governors increased allowances for their workers. A number of them had what you call food bank, a number of them, but not many. I would have expected that governance at the subnational level will key into what the federal government is doing, and as much as possible provide succor at that level, because it is at that level that the impact of whatever palliative is being applied, that will be felt. So it's the governors that will continue to appeal to. 5 billion naira, in truth, will not have immediate impact on the numbers of people in any state, because you don't have a state that is less than 1.4 million people in Nigeria. So 5 billion is not as if 5 billion is a magic, how do I call it, a magic sum, But we expect that the governors should also look at possible ways of attenuating this, the impact, as it were, of the fuel subsidy removal, knowing that more money would come to them, and indeed more money is coming to them from monthly FAC allocation. Now, whereas in the past, the average revenue head was between 600 billion and 700 billion naira. Now, over the last 7-8 months, we are talking of an average 1.1 trillion. In fact, in July particularly, it went to 1.959 trillion. So much that the federal government could save up to 700 billion. So the monthly allocation to the states and local government had increased. And this increment should reflect in the way those tiers of government, in the way they spend money, in the quality of expenditure they undertake. And they must be able to properly target the poor and the vulnerable in within their jurisdiction in a way that their expenditure will ameliorate whatever may be the possible level of existence of those people in those states.
Chief Akinsiju, let's go on a break, and when we come back, we will continue this conversation. Tonight, I've been discussing with Niyi Akinsiju, a policy analyst, journalist, chairman, Independent Media Policy Initiative. We'll take a break now, and I will be right back. Mr. Politics Tonight.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did this happen? We will be right there.
At TVC News, we follow the big and major news, gathering the facts, witnessing the outcome.
I am here live at the aftermath of the approval of the new national minimum wage.
We are TV Station of the Year, not just for breaking news, but for being first, fair and accurate. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us. Tonight, we're assessing President Tinubu's 8-month stewardship. And I've been speaking with Niyi Akinsiju, a policy analyst, journalist, writer, is also the chairman, Independent Media and Policy Initiative. Thank you so much for staying with us, sir. Now, let's talk about the naira, which continues to fall against the dollar. Do you see the naira bouncing back? And if yes, how?
Well, the naira will bounce back. This is the first, it's what we call the initial response, initial reaction to a policy change. Just like I noted, the policy of unifying all possible foreign exchange transaction window would have this kind of effect. We've been subsidizing the naira foreign exchange. I don't want to say just naira dollar, naira pounds, naira lira, naira yen. We have been subsidizing over the years. At a point in time, we're generating so much money that every month the CBN comes to the market to intervene with about $1.5 billion just to create a seeming appearance of stability in the market. And the clear definition of that is that we were taking money that was meant for some other things that should have been deployed into some other things, and put it into that privilege. It's a privileged market. Not all the 200 million plus Nigerians have access to that market. So it's only those who have enough money to travel out of the country, who are also, of course, involved in other forms of foreign engagement, that have access to it. Perhaps it would even have been more useful, more productive, and more practical if we had said, okay, the manufacturers who are producing things in Nigeria should be the only, should be given special access to foreign exchange. But again, when we do that, we will have what we call that multiple windows, because some people will now, of course, use that privilege of access to get that sum of get the subsidized money and round trip, which became the character of the Nigerian foreign exchange market over time. People who had privileged access to the CBN were taking money at the controlled rate at 463 to $1 at a point in time, and will now take it to the black market and sell at 700, 750 naira, and without raising a thumb, raising a hand, using any taking a tool to work with. Some people are making more than 300 naira on $1, just because they had linkage, nexus to some people in high offices. So that was the main reason, transparency, and of course equity. For me, that we had that harmonization, so that everybody could go on and be able to have access at any point in time. That is why the policy of market-driven, market-determined rate came into place. Some people that said, no, why don't you first generate enough foreign exchange, enough dollar, enough pounds before you introduce policy? And I said, at what point in time are we going to generate that with all the challenges that we are confronted with? So it's either we took this decision and confront it head on, or we stagnate, we continue to stagnate. Before 2023, May, June, the foreign reserve was falling. The average between 2022 and 2023 May, the average foreign reserve that we had was between 38 and $40 billion. But at the point in time, it fell to under $34 billion, our reserve. And so much, because we were actually just spending money, spending these hard-earned dollars to defend the naira, which for all practical intent and purpose was a wrong application of the little. It's little money, 40 billion. How much is it?
Right. So
and
a related
we
development,
so much on just one product.
In a related development,
with what we have now, yes. Now,
right.
What they believe now, is that what the CBN is doing. You will notice that yesterday we had the application of the net open position. Now we also know that some banks were actually exploiting the environment, exploiting this policy, which is wrong, by more or less trading in dollars, which they should not do. So some banks were reported to acquire, either borrow the dollar or raise it locally and keep it in their vault or in their books and wait for when the naira would decline or would depreciate enough for them to come to the market and dump them. So dump the dollar to make a kill, as it were. Now that those policies are being applied, we also have the policy of clearing backlogs. Those were like burden, on the foreign exchange market, because the country had a commitment to provide funds, foreign exchange, to either investors or people that had brought in their capital, who had imported capital into the Nigerian economy. When they want to exit, the CBN has a commitment to provide them with the money that they brought in and they were taking out, or with the earnings from their investment that they want to take out. Because of shortage of foreign exchange, the country had not been able to do that. So what the CBN is doing is to clear that backlog. And what that does is to send signal to the global investors that Nigeria is being responsible and holding up to its commitment to investors. And that will drive most likely will drive more foreign investors into the country. Now, when foreign investors come into the country, they come with their foreign exchange, and that helps create liquidity in the system. So that is one way of course, the naira strengthening, because what we have now is a challenge of illiquidity. We have a shortage of supply. Shortage of supply because one of our major source of revenue of foreign exchange is crude oil export. Unfortunately, for whatever reason over time, we have not been able, for security and all that, we have not been able to produce the quantity that we were producing before. Before 2019, we were doing up to 2.1 million barrels, But all of a sudden, there was this, I don't know how to describe it, in the Niger Delta area, which is the fulcrum of our crude oil production, and much stealing, became the order of the day. And because of that, we were not producing much. And at the point in time, too, the price of crude oil also fell. All this would have impact on the revenue threshold of the country, as it were. But with the right policy that are being now applied, I also understand that Okay, so, all right.
Let me quickly come in here because of our time. And I'd like us to talk about security before we wrap up tonight. The creation of state police is one of the key agendas of the Renewed Hope agenda. And lately, the conversation around the creation has been intensified seriously. Do you think this is the way forward?
Please come again, please.
I want us to talk about security and especially the creation of state police, which is... Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, yes, yeah.
Right. I was talking about security and particularly the creation of state police, which is one of the key agendas of the Renewed Hope agenda. And also, the conversation around the creation has been intensified lately by security stakeholders. Do you think this is the way forward?
Well, I think the major challenge, or rather the prospect to strengthening the Nigerian security space, actually lies in the communities. For me, it's not, even if you have state police, what we have, I don't have anything against it, but I am only concerned about its capacity to deliver eventually. What is important as far as I'm concerned, in the security hierarchy is community policing. Community policing, because it is in the communities that criminality is consummated. It's in the community that you have criminals staying. So if you have a community that is well mobilized, that is intelligence driven, proactively they can identify criminal elements amongst them, and in that way you strengthen security capacity. Either at the level of the police force or the Nigerian army and all those that are deployed for security duties, they still depend on active intelligence gathering. And intelligence gathering, either for state police or for the federal police, is at the level of community policing. So, whatever may be the term that will be bringing, the focus, as far as I'm concerned, should be on communities. Mobilize the communities, even if it is about having 5, 6 spy police, trained community people that understand how to gather information and, of course, how to file the information and how to report the intelligence to the to the relevant authority. We would be achieving more. And again, I think I should commend the Pulaka initiative recently that talks to non-kinetic engagement, because this whole engagement cannot just be about force of arms. We need to have government presence in those ungoverned spaces or in far-flung rural areas, so that those communities in far-flung places will feel the presence of government and be able to commit, to also safeguarding their own environment, their own neighborhood. So this talk about the 50 billion that was recently approved by Mr. President to implement this Pulaka initiative is welcome, is commended, because if the federal government, or in collaboration with the state government, can provide schools, can provide clinics, can provide vet clinics, and all other forms of social facilities to the communities, one, it will enable the community to have a sense of belonging. It will also enable the true occupation of that space, so that whoever is a threat to that space, the community will rise as a whole, as a unit, to confront such person.
Absolutely. That's where we wrap it up tonight. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on Politics Tonight. I've been speaking with Dr. Niyi, Chief Niyi Akinsiju, a policy analyst, journalist, writer, is also the chairman, Independence Media and Policy Initiative. Tonight, we focused on President Tinubu's 8-month stewardship. Thank you so much, sir, for doing justice to this conversation tonight. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much.
And thank you very much for watching. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But the conversation continues from here. Get in touch with us on X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatuji. Please have a great weekend. Good night.